All right, in this episode of E3, we're going to discuss fitness adaptations again, but we're going to talk about fitness adaptation number 2 as identified by Dr. Andy Galpin and the University of California, Fullerton, and his team that actually trains not only coaches, but also professional athletes themselves. If you look at last episode, we talked about on Fitness Friday, the fitness adaptation of skill. So we're moving on to number 2 today, and it's going to be speed. So this is probably the most forgotten and most misunderstood of all the fitness adaptations. Dr. Andy Galpin likes to make jokes that it's probably because it doesn't sell 24-hour fitness memberships. So because of that, there's not a lot of talk about it out there by a lot of other influencers, but I think it's important to at least understand it, even if it's not a particular type of training that you are interested in doing. The changes are more pronounced in the nervous system. There is very little change in the muscle system. So training speed is a very low intensity, very low rep range, very high rest. It's not got a lot of cardiovascular adaptations with speed like you see with strength and hypertrophy training. So a lot of people, if it's not going to make you look better naked or give you the big muscles or any of that, a lot of the fitness influencers don't tend to focus on this. I believe this adaptation is actually most important for performance athletes, not just athletes that are at the top of the game in the professional sports realm or those who aspire to be so, but any kind of performance athlete. So I think it's important that we understand that there are 2 types of speed to train. There's acceleration and max velocity. So the first one, acceleration, is moving yourself from a stop to another position instantly, like instantly making that decision and doing and making that happen. A great example of this is tennis. It is almost entirely acceleration based. Very well, no chance in tennis because there's just not enough distance to cover for you to ever reach a max velocity, but it's a fast twitch, so to speak. Basketball and football even mostly fall into this. Now, a wide receiver that has to run down the field every play and hit max velocity to outrun the safety or the cornerbacks might be one of the few that actually use that max velocity. But for the most part, acceleration is probably the most important as far as performance athletes are concerned, unless you fall in the realm of number 2, which is maximum velocity. This is a top end velocity. It takes about 15 to 30 meters or 50 to 100 feet to really get to that max velocity. Probably the best example of this is a 100, 200 yard dash. We also see a soccer can actually be a pretty decent example of this, since there's going to need to be acceleration depending on breakaway plays from one end of the field to the other. Although soccer is not my favorite, and I know I'm going to upset a lot of you guys out there, but I think there's more actors than there are athletes in soccer. Yeah, I know. Skew me in the comments. Go ahead and put me over the skewer on that one. Go ahead. I'd like to see what comments you guys have below. So, the acceleration phase takes up to about 15 to 30 meters, and then it's really just a measure of the highest mile per hour that you can hit. And so that's why you can see the 200 meter dash is probably the greatest example of this. So there's different acceleration types and ways to train as well. Really the difference between these two is just a choice of reaction. So the first one is a change of direction. Footwork drills, it's not as likely to transfer to sport. You see a lot of coaches doing these footwork drills, and those aren't necessarily bad. The problem that you run into with the footwork drills is in an actual environment where you are needing to use that footwork, you don't always have your foot in the right position at the right time, like you're training with these footwork acceleration drills, the change of direction drills. So the more common and probably the better focused for a practical use when you're out on the field is going to be this agility training. So I think most sports fall under this with speed. It's a speed based drill with a decision based at the end on which direction the ball is going or where this other player is going to be on the field at that time. So when you need to make that adjustment, and you need at a moment's notice to have to adjust or to direct your attention and or body towards something, agility training typically is a better way to do that. So there's two ways that you can actually train speed, and this isn't just acceleration, this is speed as a whole, both max velocity and your acceleration. And this is with resisted and assisted ways of training. So when you think about resistance training, you're thinking about like what we used to do when I was in track. I'll just give you guys an example of what I used to do when I was in track. We used to take not rubber bands, but we took tires, like actual inner tubes from bicycles, and we would put them over our shoulders. We'd put our arms through the loops, and then we'd cross them in the back, and someone would sit on a piece of carpet. We turn the carpet upside down so they were on the rough side, the side that you don't walk on, and then the soft side, the slick side of the carpet, they would literally sit down holding those inner tubes as we sprinted across the gym as fast as we could. And this works best in an indoor situation because you need a slick surface like that gym floor. But that would be resistance. Something is pulling me backwards and I'm trying to go forward with as much force as possible. Assisted is when you actually have something that is pulling you, so to speak. And I'll get into a little more detail on that because there's different ways in which you can train that as well. And I'll give you guys some examples from powerlifting. These guys really, in the sport of powerlifting, these guys have taken this training to the next level. And I'll explain the difference between the two and which one is better for the situation you're actually trying to train. But assisted is incredibly effective. It actually teaches you to go faster. They also call it overspeed in the training world. And you can do this with a treadmill or a coach or an assistant pulling you. There's actually an example I'm going to use here in just a minute with baseball called the wiffle bat study. It was actually done by Dr. Lee Brown. And so I guess let's just go ahead and get right into that. So resisted is great if you need to train that acceleration. Like you need to be able to come out of the blocks. We're going to use the dash example again. You need to come out of the blocks as fast as you can. What's the most powerful way to train that? Well, the most powerful way to train that is to have someone resisting against you and you're pushing right off the bat as fast as you can. When you look at something like an assisted, this actually trains you to go forward. So Dr. Andy Galpin puts it this way, and I think there's a lot of validity to this, and they're still currently doing studies to prove this. But if you want to increase your max velocity and move as fast down the field as possible, well, wouldn't you want to train yourself to not be slowed down by something, but for your body to actually compensate and learn how to move forward faster? So assisted training, they're finding, is doing amazing things in the way of max velocity. It's actually these assisted trainings, they're putting on harnesses that are connected to bungees, and people who are working on their verticals for basketball or high jump or something of that nature, they're literally jumping and they're being assisted into the air. And there's a lot of benefits to why that teaches you to follow through with the motion, not just get to that motion and then stop, but to actually follow through with that motion. So it's pretty interesting. But going back to this wiffle bat study, they found that in this wiffle bat study, that with the baseball, you see the baseball players swinging with the giant donut, weighing their bat down while they're on deck, just waiting to go up to bat. Well, the funny thing about that is that actually trains it. Even though the bat is lighter after you take the donut off, you're actually training yourself to go slower. So this clinical study done by Dr. Lee Brown shows that he had people training with the wiffle bat, and obviously a lot of this is mental as well, but you can whip that light weight through the air so much faster that it actually translates to a heavier bat when you do it later. So this is some really, really cool, almost groundbreaking stuff that they're finding right now with speed training. Once again, this is a change in your nervous system, not in the muscular or the cardiovascular adaptations. So this dynamic variable resistance or compensatory acceleration. Going back to these powerlifting guys, what they're doing right now is they're putting these giant bands around their weights. So as they go down for a squat, it actually gets heavier and heavier and heavier the farther down they, or I'm sorry, lighter and lighter and lighter the farther down they go, so they can burst back up. And as they come back up and that band has got less tension on it, it is actually causing more of the weight to be on your shoulders. So maybe you have 500 pounds when you are doing a squat. Well, maybe at the bottom, it really only feels like 400. And as you come back up, it feels like 425, 450, 475, and then 500 at the very end. They're also doing this the opposite direction, where they're banding it to the ground, and they do a lot with it. The powerlifters are doing this with the bench press. And so it gets heavier at the top and you get at the bottom, but it teaches you to explode going back up. So these are just some really interesting things that I found interesting anyway, that as I started looking into the fitness adaptation of speed. You don't see anyone else out on the internet talking about it, but I think it's important that we go through all 9 of the fitness adaptations, because I think this is a game changer for those of you guys out there trying to change the physical status of yourself and your capabilities and your athleticism. So I wanted to touch on this stuff. Please, in the comments below, let me know what you guys, not just about the soccer comments, but let me know what you guys think about training speed and the different fitness adaptations that we've covered. I'm your guy, Kenny B of E3, aka KNTX, the guide to helping you be the hero of your story.